Welcome to episode 81 of the Selling Your Screenplay podcast. I'm Ashley Scott Myers, screenwriter and blogger over at sellingyourscreenplay.com. Today I'm interviewing David Garrett. He's a writer and producer and lawyer who's written such films as Deuce Bigalow, European Gigolo, and Corki, Romano. He's a real hustler, and we talk in depth about how he sold many of his projects. And for the most part, all of these sales came without the benefit of an agent. So if you're a writer without an agent, you're definitely not going to want to miss this episode because he goes into some real solid detail about how he got his scripts sold, just really through sheer hustle. So stay tuned for that. If you find this episode valuable, please help me out by giving me a review in iTunes or leaving a comment on YouTube or retweeting the podcast on Twitter or liking it on Facebook. These social media shares really do help spread the word about the podcast, so they're very much appreciated. A couple of quick notes. Any websites or links that I mentioned in the podcast can be found on my blog in the show notes. I also publish a transcript with every episode in case you'd rather read the show or look at something later on. You can find all the podcast show notes at www.sellingyourscreenplay.com/podcast, and then just look for episode number 81. If you want my free guide, How to Sell a Screenplay in 5 Weeks, you can pick that up by going to sellingyourscreenplay.com/guide. It's completely free. You just put in your email address and I'll send you a new lesson once per week for 5 weeks along with a bunch of bonus lessons. I teach the whole process of how to sell your screenplay in that guide, how to write a professional logline inquiry letter, how to find agents, managers, and producers who are looking for material. Really is everything you need to know to sell your screenplay. Just go to sellingyourscreenplay.com/guide. I just want to mention two things I'm doing over at Selling Your Screenplay to help screenwriters get their scripts into the hands of producers and sell their screenplays. First, we've created a monthly newsletter that will be sent directly to producers. Every member of SYS Select can submit one logline per newsletter. This can be a feature film logline. It can be a television pilot logline, whatever you're working on. I went and I emailed my large list of producers and asked them if they would like to receive this monthly newsletter of pitches. So far we have well over 100 producers who have signed up to receive it. These producers are hungry for material and happy to read scripts from new writers. So if you want to participate in the pitch newsletter and get your script into the hands of producers who are looking for scripts, sign up at sellingyourscreenplay.com/select. And secondly, we're now fielding leads from producers for screenwriters. We're doing a lot of outreach by trying to bring in requests from producers for screenwriters. Last week, I think we had more than 8 paid screenwriting leads. So this is just a great way, again, to find producers who are actually looking for material. Again, these leads are from producers who are requesting material. They're coming to us and they're saying, I need a script like this. Some of them are very, very specific. They need a very specific genre. They need a specific script for a specific actor or actress. So these leads are very, very specific. You may not be able to submit to every one of them, but that's in some ways the good news. Because they're so specific, a lot of other writers are not going to have a script that fits their needs. So when you find one that actually does fit their needs, they only may have, 8 or 10 script submissions. So your chances of actually getting read and getting, seriously considered are quite good because these leads are specific. And part of my whole strategy, as you know, if you listen to this podcast, is writing a lot of material. So hopefully you have 3, 4, 5, maybe even 8 or 10 scripts that you're out there selling. So no matter what someone is looking for, you will hopefully have something that might come close to fitting their needs. Again, these are leads from producers seeking material. They're very, very specific. And if you have the right script, it's a great way to get that script into the hands of someone who is really looking for something like exactly what you have. So if you want to sign up for this service, again, just go to sellingyourscreenplay.com/select. Again, that's sellingyourscreenplay.com/select. So now let's get into the main segment. Today I'm interviewing David Garrett. Here is the interview. Welcome, Dave, to the Selling Your Screenplay podcast. I really appreciate you coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.
So to start out, maybe you can take us back, to your childhood, to college, and kind of just bring us through those, decisions and things that happened in your life that led you to becoming a professional screenwriter.
Well, I do remember even in first grade or second grade, we would get assignments where we would have to read a book and do a synopsis of the book, sort of write down, answer questions about it. But instead of doing that, I would write these long, elaborate stories on my big chief tablet, like 15 pages, and they would be very inappropriate for my age. And it would be about monsters killing people and gargoyles and things like that. And I just remembered the teacher saying, you know what, you need to just, if you want to be a writer, just go write things. But, this is the school you need to learn. This is not the place to learn how to write stories. And so I was like, oh, well, I like writing stories. So that's how I got into it.
Okay. And at what point did you start to say, gee, this legitimately could be a career?
Well, it's funny because, I'm from Texas, and sort of people are very practical there. And I think a lot of people come from back. People say, well, you know what, Hollywood, that's just a place for, highfalutin people and people who are different. Nobody wants to hear what a kid from Texas has to say, what you have to write. So you sort of have to, wherever anybody's from, somebody might be from Ohio, they might be from wherever, and everyone there is going to tell you, you know what, just leave that to the professionals out in Hollywood writing. You don't need to do that. Get yourself a normal job and settle down and that. And so I had to fight my way out of that because a lot of people told me that. And I remember telling me that, and then that sort of made me more anxious to get out here to try to make it. And what actually got me out here, it was sort of funny because I graduated from college, and my brother he's a pilot. And when you're a pilot, if you get a job, you need to go tomorrow for the assignment. And my brother came in, and I literally graduated from college 5 minutes before. And my brother said, hey, I just got a job in LA flying planes. You want to go move out there with me? And I was like, sure. So I jumped in the car, packed one suitcase, and just came out here.
Huh. And at that point, you had no aspirations to be a screenwriter?
I thought about it. It was one of those things that wasn't tangible. I thought, well, maybe, I knew people wrote movies, and I knew that I liked movies. I didn't think that there was a connection between me writing movies and actually, being able to make a living doing it.
And so what was your major in college?
Business.
Okay. That's a good business decision to just move out to Hollywood. So the bottom line, though, is you didn't know anybody in Hollywood, and you had not read or even read any scripts, much less written any scripts.
Exactly. But I knew I wanted to do something in Hollywood. I got out here. I thought it was a sign. I have a way to get out here. I started taking acting classes at UCLA Extension. And then I went by UCLA. I was on campus and went by the law school, and I picked up an application, and I actually took the LSAT, and I applied to law school at UCLA. I figured, well, I'm out here. I might as well see if maybe I'll go to grad school, but I knew I couldn't get into the film school because I didn't have any film undergrad. But I got into the law school, and so, in a strange, weird way, it helped me because I learned entertainment law and the business of entertainment before I started screenwriting.
Huh. So did you actually graduate with a law degree and practice as a lawyer?
Yes. I graduated from UCLA. I passed the bar, and I started working in business affairs. Business affairs is that part of the legal business where you negotiate contracts for writers or for companies. And I started working at a company called National Lampoon. And it was sort of a small production company. It was in the 90s. It was still sort of, it came out, they did Animal House and all the big movies in the 70s, Vacation, but it's sort of, fallen on hard times. And I started writing because I was doing the deals for the scripts they were buying. And I was reading the scripts, and I was like, you guys are paying money for this piece of shit? I was like, I could write a script better than this. And so I started talking to the interns and the other kids around there. And I said, hey, I know we could write a better script than this. And so I sat down with one of the interns there, and we wrote a screenplay, and we ended up selling it.
Huh. Okay, so take us through that process. I mean, obviously having a legal background, that probably gives you a lot of the business savvy to go out there, and you probably were making contacts. But just take us through that process. So now you've written a script, and how did you actually go about selling it?
Well, the way you go about selling it, and it's different if you live here. It's different than if you're not from here. And also social media makes things a lot easier now. Back in 1994, when you wanted to sell a script, you literally every night had to go out to a bar or to a party and meet people. And, at that point, what you would want to do is you want to meet agents' assistants. You couldn't really meet agents, but you'd meet their assistants. And the assistants are hungry to get new material, and they want to, make their way and find the new hot writer. And so what I did is I wrote this first script with my friend Brian, and he had we started just talking to everybody we knew, saying, we have a new screenplay. And one of our friends was an assistant to a director. Another one was an intern at a production company. We just gave our script to a bunch of people to read. And we got 3 or 4 people interested. 3 or 4 production companies called us after reading it. And then a couple of them made offers on it.
Okay. And so what ended up ultimately happening with that script?
The script, it's still kicking around. They bought it. It was funny. And it never got made. It was the story. It was about it's called Rubenesque, and it was about a fat woman who goes back in time and becomes a supermodel. She goes back in time to, remember in 1600 when, being like fat was like the hot thing. And if you were fat, and the fat women on paintings, the naked fat women, that Rubens painted. It was sort of our take on beauty, because if you were, back then, if you looked like Giselle Bundchen, if you were tall, thin, and tanned, that meant you were a servant who worked out in the fields. And you were thin because you couldn't afford food, and you were tan because you were outside. And so, if you were pasty, fat, and very, like that, then that meant you were hot. You were super hot. So it was the story of a supermodel and her fat assistant who go back in time, and they switch roles. So it was the switch type movie. And, it just never came to fruition. But, I've even recently, the producer, spoke to the producer. There's people interested. So you never know. 20 years later, stuff can still happen.
Yeah. So, okay. So, you had a leg up being a lawyer, negotiating the contract. Did you negotiate that contract, or did you at that point try and get an agent manager? Maybe take us through those actual steps. What happened as you got through that first sale? Okay.
Well, it's, and once again, being out here in LA is different than if you're elsewhere. Like being out here, I literally, when I moved out here, I'm not a party person. But every night I would go out to bars, go to parties. You just have to meet people. You have to meet as many people as you can. And I'm trying to think of who I met. Actually, I met a guy who was an agent's assistant, and then he got bumped up to being an agent. And I went to him and just said, "Hey, can you work on this deal? Help us with this deal." It's very important. That you sort of, as a writer, you figure out, be realistic about how you want to approach your career. What was interesting with me, because I wasn't, there's certain types of writers who, they lock themselves in a basement and they write their script and they don't leave for 6 months, and they're artists and no one's going to change a word of my script. That sort of writer. But I've never been that sort of writer. I've been sort of the writer, the realistic sort of producer type writer that I know, what, I've got to get out there and bust my ass and market my scripts, because I promise you can have the best idea on the planet. And I've done this before. This is the most unique idea on the planet. Walk in to pitch, and the executive says, "You know what, look over in that shelf." Has 5 scripts by 5 different writers, the exact same idea. And so you can't count on the uniqueness of your idea selling it, because it's probably not that as unique as you think it's going to be. So you have to find a way to present it. You have to find a way to anticipate the market, sort of make sure things are timely, but make sure they're not, you're not chasing a trend. It's like this, negotiation, goes on a like a raging river, wild, rapid to get something sold.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so you have this friend who goes from a junior agent to a full agent. Did he then become your full-on agent and start getting you more work, getting your scripts out there?
Oh yeah, it was a guy named Phil Raskin who's now at William Morris. He was an assistant, and I just knew him socially through friends, and he was an assistant. When Endeavor, when that agency started, he called me. He said, "Hey, I'm now an agent at Endeavor. Do you have any projects?" And we brought him over this script, and then he helped us get it going. And that's sort of the way. It's weird. It's unless you're out here sort of day to day doing it, you don't realize it's all about relationships out here, and relationships that take sometimes years to develop going. Me as I've been doing this a while, I mentor younger writers and sort of help them because, from you come out when you first start, you're the new hip, young, hot writer. And then you're in the game for a while. Then you're sort of the mid-level guy who's been around a while. After that, you're the guy who's been around too long, so nobody wants to hire Razzie nominations, and you're sort of out of it. And so then now what I do is I team up with younger writers to keep me relevant and to help them. And it's sort of it's just all about just recognizing as much as the creative part of it.
Yeah,
if that makes sense.
Yeah, sure. So let's keep the story going. So then you have this agent, you've sold the one script. What does a career look like? I think a lot of people, especially when they're starting out, they think, man, once I get that first sale, it's just off to the moon. And I find with a lot of writers is you get that first sale and things can kind of level out, or they don't go up nearly as quickly as a lot of people might think. So take us through sort of the next steps. What was the next phase of your career?
Well, I mean, it took me 3 or 4 years to sell another screenplay.
Okay,
that's
the
first one, because I literally, it was the first completed screenplay I'd ever written, but I wrote it with a guy who was really a great writer. And so he taught me every writing, sort of gave me the lessons. And I was like, oh, wow, this is easy. You write a script and then you have 3 different companies bidding on it. Wow. But, so it took me about 4 years to sell another script. But in the meantime, I was working, doing a lot of TV and doing, every type of gig I could get, gigs other people would turn down, writing wrestling, writing, reality shows back when it wasn't cool to do reality shows, and just learning the business and keeping. That's sort of the trick out here is you have to stay in the game. You want to stay relevant because you can't force things. You can't force a good idea. You can't force the market. Like, for example, I have a friend who, he's a guy, he went to prison when he was 18. He was an ex-con. All he writes are hard-hitting sort of, tough, hard-boiled crime characters, underground crime guys. And so, for 10 years, he couldn't really get work. He taught college classes. And then all of a sudden, Sopranos, Breaking Bad, Sons of Anarchy starts happening. And then he starts working a lot on all of those shows because that's his style of writing. He had no jobs in the 90s because it was all about sitcoms. Mm-hmm. And then the early 2000s was reality shows. And then all of a sudden, he's on Sons of Anarchy and all these shows. So you've got to sort of stay in the game, figure out what it is you like to do, and then take advantage of things as they happen. Take advantage of opportunities.
Yeah. You mentioned some of this TV work you were doing, writing, wrestling, and this kind of stuff. Maybe you can tell us a little bit sort of how you got those gigs. Was that just a function of having a good agent who was getting you in touch with those producers and getting you hired? 99
out of 100 times the jobs you get are your own doing, not agents. Because agents sort of, you have to consider the stuff they're getting is everybody in town's hearing it. The way that you get a job is just by getting out there. And here's a great example. A friend of mine saw an ad in Craigslist. It said, this is about 2 years ago. It said a new show needed someone to do their social networking stuff, Twitter, Facebook, whatever. And it said low pay. So he applied for it, and he started doing the show. I won't say the name, but it's a syndicated sort of reality comedy show. He started doing their Twitter and Facebook stuff, and they said, you know what, you're pretty funny. Why don't you come in and write some jokes for the host? So he started writing stuff for the host. The network, as they were watching the rough cuts, they heard him behind the camera pitching out the jokes. And they said, that guy behind the camera is funnier than the host. Let's bring him in. And so they put him on camera as one of the hosts.
Huh.
And then the next year, he got hired to executive produce the show. And that's, it's stuff happens. It's just, you have to just be there, and you have to do your part and have a great attitude. And people will come to you with jobs if you're here. And it's completely different. And I know it's frustrating because I say, if you're here, well, wherever, here is New York or LA or wherever the jobs are. If you're not here, then you have to approach your career in a completely different way. You have to approach it as the outsider, and you've got to, not just write screenplays, but you've got to do a blog. You've got to write, a novel and publish it yourself. So you have IP, because you don't have the opportunity just to go day by day and do jobs and meet people. Does that make sense?
Sure. So maybe we can dive into some of these specifics, and you can kind of talk about, how you got the specific job. So, on IMDb, let's just start with the first credit that you have. It's called Family Challenge. It's a TV series. I think this will be interesting. I get a lot of people asking about TV, and you're laughing at the assignment, but I'm sure there's a lot of people listening to this that would, kill just to get that professional credit. So maybe take us through something like that. Exactly how that.
I will. Speaking of killing, that show was so bad, the host killed himself during at the end of the run of the show. So, and you can look that up. His name was Ray Combs. It was kind of sad.
Yeah.
But the way that I sold that show, it's I was working as a lawyer at a production company, and I was super desperate to get out of there because I didn't like the legal work. And producers would always come in and be pitching, and so I literally, after they pitched, because I wasn't allowed in the meetings, I would chase them down into the elevator and go, hey, I know you just had a meeting here, but I'm a writer also, and I was wondering, are you looking for any projects? I would do that every day. I would look at the president's little calendar, and then I would follow them. And it just so happened one guy I ran into was a producer at ABC. He said, yeah, well, ABC's looking for a family game show, if you can come up with some ideas. I said, well, what are the parameters? He said, well, ABC. And so my writing partner and I, that night, sat down and we wrote out a 10-page outline for this show. And we faxed it to him. And he called us the next morning. He said, okay, you guys are crazy, but I like what you did. I'm faxing it over to ABC. And then he called about a day later and he said, guess what? They want to shoot a pilot of this. ABC does. And that was without an agent, without anything. It was just because I was just desperate. And so then we shot a pilot of it, and ABC turned it down. But then another channel, it's the predecessor to ABC Family, was Fox Family. And it was one just called the Family Channel. They picked it up and did 100 episodes.
Wow.
Sort of the Writers Guild.
You never were concerned about just getting fired as a lawyer if your bosses found out that you were.
Oh, no, I did quit. After the show got picked up, I quit. So
I had a friend that worked in radio, and he was one of the producers of the morning show, and people would come through there and he would pitch them and they would reprimand him.
Oh, yeah?
When he would try and do that.
Well, you've got to know what your goal is, your long-term goal, and sort of, if you have fear, this is not a good business for fear. People with fear, because if you do, you're going to get stopped, because everyone's going to tell you can't do it along the way, and you can't do that, and don't go talk to that guy or do anything. And I'm just the opposite. I will go and talk to whoever, and just sort of introduce myself, and not in a stalkery sort of way, but in a business-like way. And that's another thing is you have to do your homework as a writer. A lot of writers I know are sort of clueless, and you're standing there and you're like, you know what? That's the producer of Homeland is in the elevator with us. Say something, say hi or whatever. But most writers don't notice it. They're sort of in their head. They're complaining about everything, and they don't realize the person who can give them a job is standing right next to them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I want to take a step back just for one quick moment, because I know there's a lot of people listening to this that have other careers. Maybe they're a lawyer, accountant, or whatever, and maybe you can talk about that transition. Obviously, you were being very aggressive pursuing screenwriting, but maybe you can talk about that transition and just some of the fears. I'm sure your family was like, "Gee, you just spent all this money on a UCLA law education. Now you're just going to throw it all away and go try this half-baked idea of being a screenwriter." So maybe you can speak a little bit to that, sort of what your thought process was and how much money did you save? How much money did you ever get to the point where you were close to returning to being a lawyer?
Well, I've never really stopped being a lawyer, and that's that's something that everyone out there who has a first career has to realize. Use what you do as your first career to help you in your screenwriting career. So, for example, when I was first starting out, I would go to all the comedy clubs and I would talk to the comedians and I'd get to know them and say, hey, anybody, if you need any legal help with anything, let me know. And so a few of the comedians, for example, Jamie Kennedy, I met him early on, and he actually wrote a book called Wannabe about his first 10 years in Hollywood. And Jamie did Malibu's Most Wanted and a bunch of TV. And part of a chapter in his book is about how I used to represent him when he would do road gigs. But it would literally be when he first started, like, okay, now Jamie's going to get 3 drinks instead of 2 free drinks, and he's going to get dinner. And I noticed that, he's in a Motel 6, but instead I think he should be in a, Super 8 or whatever. But I would do that. And you have to sort of think about out here rather than, a lot of people think, what can I get? What can I get from Hollywood? Who can I get to buy my script? Rather than thinking that way, I like to think, what can I give to other people that's going to help them and elevate them so then they can help me? And, for example, Jamie and I have done several TV shows together, and it's all based on the early relationship where I helped him on some of his gigs. And then when he got his TV show, he called me and he said, hey, Warner Brothers wants to do a new TV show. Let's come up with some ideas. And then we pitched them a show, and we, did 3 seasons of it.
Mm-hmm. And I wonder, when you're back in these comedy clubs, was there any kind of filtering process? Like, you saw Jamie Kennedy, you said, that guy's funny, let's get to know him. You must have gotten to know dozens of comedians that didn't make it. Take us through your thought process there. I'd be curious to hear. I mean, did you see that he was really talented from the early on, and that was why you fostered that relationship?
Oh, yeah. I mean, the first time I saw Jamie, I just said, that guy's a star. You just knew right when he went up on stage. He just had a different presence than anybody else. And I actually did stand up for several years. I was just really bad. I was not very funny. And the other comedians would come up and go, Dave, I don't know if you're cut out for doing stand up, but can I have that joke about blah, blah, blah? Or can I? And they all would, I would write jokes for people, even though I wasn't funny. And then I realized, maybe I'm more of a writer than a comedian. But, it's funny because I was watching a documentary, and this will make a point. The lead singer of Iron Maiden is named Bruce Dickinson, and he's, everybody knows him as the lead singer of Iron Maiden, but he's also a very successful businessman who owns a company that deals in aviation parts. Because flying around on tour with Iron Maiden, he got interested in planes and he started flying, and then he started being the pilot when they went on tour, and then he opened up his own aviation company. And the thing is you can do more than one thing. Tom Clancy was a successful insurance salesman until he wrote his novels. And so I think people have to realize that, just because you don't think, oh, I'm trapped in my day job and I'm never going to get out of this. think of it as the fact that I have this day job, I'm making money, that gives me freedom to do what I want to do. You know, I'm blessed to have my job, and that gives me freedom. So now I can, you know, write, try to sell my script and do that. I don't know. I forgot where that came from, but that was just a side thing I was thinking.
Okay. Yeah. So are you still practicing law and you still have clients that you work with as a lawyer?
Yeah.
Okay.
If you check my IMDb, can you see, if you check other credits, you'll see I'm, you know, legal, production legal on a bunch of different films.
Huh. Okay.
And the reason being is, as a writer, you're not always going to make a living. Some years, you know, you're going to do great. Some years it's, you know, you're going to not do well. And I've had both. And so what you have to do is you have to think of it as a long-term, as a career, a lifelong career, as opposed to, I'm going to, make all my money. I'm going to make a living writing, all the time, because it's just not going to happen. So it's better to have something to fall back on, just to keep you going, and also keep relationships.
Yeah, for sure. That's, your candor and your story is absolutely, it's awesome. And it's very, very inspiring. I think people are really going to get a lot out of this. I wonder if we could dig into a few more of these credits. Sure. The Jeff Foxworthy show. Your story is so great about pitching the guy on the elevator. So maybe you can tell us some of these other great stories from some of these other credits. How did you get the job on the Jeff Foxworthy show?
Okay. Foxworthy was, interesting because, it was sort of a cattle call, tons of writers going in, and they would ask you, how can you write on this show? And I knew from other friends who'd gone in, they would say, what do you know about Jeff? What do you know about Southern, humor? And so before I went in, I, had been in Texas, and I got my mom. My mom is this sort of, crazy Southern woman. And I said, here, Mom, can you tell me a couple of funny stories about growing up in the South? And this one story she told, well, first off, Bonnie and Clyde stole her grandparents' Cadillac, in 1934. So that was the story. And then my mom was, I don't know if she was born yet, but her sister always talks about that. The second story was, how my mom used to chase rats around the house with a baseball bat. And so I went in and met with Jeff and met with everybody, and they asked me that same question. I said, well, you know what? I think that my stories are gonna. I have a bunch of great stories, but not for me. These are my mom's stories, and I played a couple of them, and they were dying laughing, and I was like, you know what? There's a million of those where that came from. And they were like, great, you're hired.
And back it up just a little bit. How did you get in a position where you were brought in on that cattle call?
That was after I'd sold the screenplay. I sat down with my writing partner, and we wrote a bunch of spec pilots. Spec TV comedy shows. So back then, it wasn't cool to write a spec pilot. You would have to write your Seinfeld and write your whatever. And so we just wrote a bunch of half-hour specs, and we sent them to a bunch of showrunners, just sort of got addresses and sent them out, and people would read them, and then just you'd get random calls. Hey, come in and interview for this.
Mm-hmm. And was it like your agent would get the addresses and package them, but your agent would make the submission? Because you always get that. Well, we don't take unsolicited. Have your agent submit it.
Yeah, that I can't remember specifically, but I never really go by that we don't take unsolicited submissions thing, because you just have to sort of, if you approach people in the right way, you're going to get someone to read it. So for example, if say someone has a screenplay, what I would do is I would take my screenplay and I would pick the 10 production companies or 15 that would do this movie. And, the way to do that is watch movies that are similar to this, see the production companies at the beginning, a blank production, so-and-so productions, then go on IMDb, look up that company, and find the lowest person at the company. There's president, VP, director of development, creative person, and then assistant to the assistant. and I've done this before. Find the lowest person and call that person up and say, I know you guys probably don't take unsolicited submissions, but I just wanted to see if you would take a look at my script. Sometimes I'll do the thing of like, you know what, I'm in a screenwriting class at blank school, or I'm taking this course, and part of my assignment is I have to interview 3 executives at production companies. Now, can I interview you? And then you interview them and get to know them and say, I'm not going to pitch anything. I just want to interview you. I have to ask you 8 questions about being an executive. You do that. They love to talk about themselves. Everybody does. Then you do your report and you go back, send them a nice thank you note. And a month later, you go back and go, I really appreciate it. I got an A on my report. I'm not going to bother you now about my script, but in the future, if I have a script, could I send it to you? Then that, and then, a month later say, hey, I finally got that script finished. You want to take a look at it? I mean, that's how you do it. You have to sort of, you have to build a relationship with someone any way you can.
Yeah, yeah. So now you've been at this for 20 years. How many, like in your Rolodex, how many of these relationships do you have? Like if you were to finish a new spec or a new pilot for a TV show, how many people would you have that you could pick up the phone and call and really know you and get it out to?
I mean, I have a lot, but everyone, shuffles around, shifts around. Mm-hmm. So the person that you know in one company could be gone, next week. So you just have to sort of try to keep in touch with people. And what I try to do, it's funny because people kind of know me as a screenwriter, but also whenever anybody has a problem, they call me. And I don't know why, but people know, if I have a problem, like a guy called me and said, I really need I need a good immigration attorney because I have to go to Canada and blah, blah, blah. And everybody knows that I know how to solve problems. So they call me. And it's funny. That's how I get more jobs than submitting things, because everyone calls me up and, hey, blah, blah, blah. And then you do favors for people, and then they will, later on, they'll remember you and they'll say, okay, well, Dave helped me out. And I don't know any names, but for example, there was a kid who was an assistant, and at a studio, and he got fired from his job. And I called and said, hey man, I'm really concerned about you. I haven't heard from you in a while. You doing okay? And he's like, you know what? You're the only person who's called to check on me since I got fired. No one really cares. Cares since I can't do anything for him anymore. And I was like, well, you know what, dude, let me know. I'm looking out for jobs. And then it's turned out, it's 5 years later, he's produced a ton of movies, and he always calls me and says, hey, what are you doing? You want to come in and do a rewrite? You want to come do a punch up on a movie? Things like that. Just because I didn't just look at him as like, okay, this is the guy I'm looking to give me a job. I actually genuinely, was concerned about him as a human.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, that's just absolutely great advice. Okay, so take us through like some of your feature work. Just scanning your IMDb page, was Corki Romano the first script that you wrote and sold, and as a feature, was that the first feature that got produced?
Yes. And so that's a great story because my writing partner and I, we couldn't get a job. We were literally completely just unemployable for a year, and we had worked on some really crappy TV shows, like the lowest rated shows on TV, and then we even got fired from those shows. And so we decided, if we're going to leave Hollywood, we're going to go out in a bang. So we said, let's make the most offensive short film we can make and send it to everybody in town and see what happens. And so we made this short film. It was 7 minutes long, and it was called Sunday's Game. And it was about these 5 old women who get together every Sunday and play Russian roulette. And throughout the course of the short film, they all kill themselves. And I guess it was also sort of part of our frustration. We were trying to make something to piss everybody off. And so we literally made hundreds of copies and sent it to everybody in town. And we were like, okay, well, I guess our careers are done. And then all of a sudden we started getting calls from people wanting to hire us for things. And you can go online and still see it. It's called Sunday's Game. And it was, we got a deal at Fox to do 2 pilots based on it. And then, we got the deal at Disney. We got a deal at Disney. They called us and they wanted to do, us to pitch stuff. We didn't get a deal. We just got a call to go pitch something. And so we knew they wanted to do something with Chris Kattan. And so we just said, okay, what are the 10 most unlikely situations Chris Kattan as a person and as a character would ever be in? And we were going down the line. Well, we would think about different things. And then we started laughing. We thought about the movie Donnie Brasco, because I think we'd just seen that, where the FBI sends someone undercover in the mob. And we were like, why doesn't the mob send somebody undercover in the FBI? And then we started laughing about that. And we said, well, the worst possible place for Chris Kattan to ever be would be the FBI. And so that's how we came up with the idea. We just said, okay, it's Chris Kattan undercover in the FBI. And that's sort of where the idea came from. And the reason that we sold it and it was it got made was there was this actors strike was being threatened. There's always a strike being threatened. Mm-hmm. And I guess that year, August 15th was the last day before the strike. And so all the studios are trying to make all their movies really fast. And so they were like, okay, we're going to buy this pitch from you, but you guys, if you don't write whoever, they bought 5 pitches for Chris, and they said, okay, whoever finishes their script first and it's the best script, we're going to make that movie. And so my writing partner and I, we checked into the Motel 6 in like Carpinteria, which is north of LA. We had somebody drop us off without car keys or anything because we wanted to finish the script. And so we wrote the script in like 10 days. We sent it to the studio and they greenlit it. And so that's because, and what happened is we started it May 15th. They greenlit it June 1st. They started shooting July 1st, and then they finished August 14th. And so that's how that movie got made. But it was all, I can trace back, to the making that short film got everybody to notice us.
Yeah. And maybe you can just elaborate a little bit. You said you made the short film Sunday's Game and then you sent it out. What exactly does sent it out mean? Did you just go on IMDb and pick random people? Did you have a Rolodex of people that you already knew so they were watching it and they kind of had some context?
Yeah, as a combination. We went on IMDb and sent it to people we wanted to work with. We even sent it to David Lynch. We sent it to some strange, sort of people. We just sent it out to a lot of people we wanted to work with and sent it to people we worked, that we had worked with. And we just put our phone number on it. And what was funny, the funniest thing about it was we would get these horrendous messages like, I just watched your film and it was the worst, most evil film I've ever seen in my entire life. I feel sick to my stomach. But I was wondering, can I get 4 more copies? Because I want to send it out to a couple of friends. And this was back, when, we sent it out on a VHS. And yeah, we didn't even send it it was 1999. It was VHS all the way.
Yeah. And so now, again, just to be absolutely clear, you literally put a phone number on there. You didn't put your names. So even the people you knew, they didn't know who this was coming from. There were no credits that identified you.
In the film, it had our names, but we just put Sunday's Game and we put our phone number because we didn't even want people to know our names or anything until they watched the movie. Because the thing about the movie was it's 7 minutes long, but the first 4 minutes are boring as shit. It's just 5 old women talking about playing bridge and going to the grocery store. And so a lot of people would watch 3 minutes and go, well, I don't understand this movie, or 5. And then at 5 minutes, the women all start shooting themselves. And so it was sort of it was a test to see if people actually watched it or if they would watch it. So you gotta check it out because it actually, I know NYU Film School actually includes it in their curriculum.
Okay, I'll dig it up on YouTube, and I will link to it in the show notes so people can find it. And I'll definitely definitely take a look at that. So I wonder, taking a step back, sort of, maybe this is a more philosophical question, but, do you see, after working in the industry for a while, like, what does separate those guys that are at sort of the top of the pinnacle, essentially the A-list writers that, I always say you really haven't made it until you have enough money in the bank to live for the rest of your life and never work again. Those are really the only people that have truly made it. But there are definitely some writers that reach those pinnacles. And do you think it's they're born with more talent? Do you think they get a little bit luckier? Where is that mix for those guys?
I mean, I think it's a combination. It's a combination of talent and luck, because you don't know when you write a script or if you make a movie if it's going to be a big hit. But if it is a big hit and you've got your head on straight and you got a little bit of talent, then you can parlay that into another gig. And if that's a hit, then you can keep doing it. So you've got to just be persistent. Because I know people that are, that I started out with. Some are super A-level showrunners. And some people quit the business 10 years ago and left town. And when I say that the top level guys have more talent than the low level the guys that left, I couldn't say that. But I can say that there's a certain combination of talent and perseverance and personality that will get you get you there. And it's little things, and it sounds dumb. But I had a friend who worked on sitcoms with me, and he was a good laugher. And when we would have run-throughs on stage, he would be out there and he would laugh really loud at the jokes. And he was just a writer's assistant. And pretty soon the producers started putting him at the front to laugh. And then pretty soon they were like, you know what? He needs to be writing. Why is he a writer's assistant? And so he literally, because he had a good laugh and a great attitude, he worked his way up to becoming a executive producer in a short amount of time. Just it's that intangible thing that gets people to notice you.
Mm-hmm. I mean, you mentioned like seeing Jamie Kennedy early on in his career, and you felt like there was definitely sort of a magic to him, and he stood out amongst these other comedians. And I guess that's what I'm kind of getting at. Do you feel like, in just all these writers, you said some of them packed up and left town, is there anybody that stands out that you say, man, that guy just really was talented, but for whatever reason never made it? And maybe even vice versa, someone who's like, that guy's really talented, he's gonna make it, and sure enough, he does.
Well, a lot of people, I know people who are talented, but they short circuit themselves either through drugs or alcohol or just simply just a bad attitude. You have to sort of, if you look at my IMDb, if you look at, my Razzie nominations, you'll see I've had ups and downs in my career, but I'm really not a different person when I'm up or when I'm down. And if you let those ups and downs affect you to the point where it changes your personality, then you're in trouble. Because it's really when you're down here, you're really down. When things are bad and nobody wants you, it's a really bad feeling, and it's a tough town to be in. So if you don't have a good attitude, you're screwed. It's just that you're going to be miserable. And some people are miserable when they're doing well.
Yeah. And I wonder, and that kind of, that's the person. And I wonder if you get on to the actual like work and you look at that. Obviously at this point you've got a long list of shows you've worked on, movies you've worked on. Was there any sense with the ones that maybe were you even described that first show as terrible? Is there a sense when you're doing the work that this show is terrible and unsalvageable, or is there a sort of mystery? Because you're talking about, sometimes you have a hit and you don't really know why. Is there a sense on these projects when you're working on them that, this is actually pretty good, I think it's got a shot, and this thing's headed for the Razzies?
Yeah, you can sort of tell sometimes that, I don't know, it's just it's frustrating as a writer. It's frustrating when you're sitting on a set and I don't want to name names or even movies, but when you're on a set, you have a script you really like, and then you realize the director doesn't get the jokes. And the director is sort of, he's shooting the setup, but then leaving off the punchline, or he's changing the script to take out everything that's funny because he just doesn't get the humor. And it's frustrating, and you're like, this is going to be a disaster. But maybe he knows what he's doing. Everyone tells me he's a great director because he directed, a Skittles commercial or whatever. But then, it turns out you were right. And you're like, okay, why am I the only one that thought it sucked? It's a weird situation to be in because so many people out here telling you, no, trust us. And you're like,
Yeah. So one question that occurred to me as you were talking earlier on, I just wanted to ask, and I mean, what you've done is so, as I said, this has been a great interview. It's inspiring to the writers, because I get so many people emailing me, hey man, how do I get an agent? And it's like, listen, it's not going to be that easy, even if you get an agent. They think that it's just smooth. I got to get the agent. And has your agent ever sold anything for you?
I've had several agents, and it's funny because, getting an agent, writers should not focus on that. Don't even worry about it. When you need an agent, you'll get an agent. They'll show up when you sell a project to get their 10%. Some agents have gotten me jobs. However, if you want to have a career out here, it's all about you inventing yourself, inventing a persona, creating relationships, and creating, bridges to people and to companies that will create your own jobs. So, like when an agent, when they get, open assignments thing and they see that there's an open writing assignment at DreamWorks, there's 50 people, or more being submitted for that job. It's very difficult for you to get that job. The way you're going to get a job is if you develop relationships, and you can do that by going to film festivals. I know more people who've gotten jobs at the Austin Film Festival than have gotten jobs out in LA just hanging out. Because in Austin, Shane Black goes and hangs out there. Top agents go there. Top managers go there looking for undiscovered talent. So if you go there and you hang out at the Driscoll Hotel in the lobby, you're as likely to meet an agent or an agent's assistant as if you come out to LA. So that's my advice for, don't worry about getting an agent. But what I would do is submit to film festivals, go to film festivals, and just start talking to people. Start talking to producers and get to know as many people as you can, and let them do the work for you out here, since you're not out here.
Yeah, for sure. So as I said, Dave, this has been a great interview. I mean, we could go on for hours. I do want to wrap it up. You've been very generous with your time. I always like to just end the interview with asking, is there some way for people to keep up with you? If you have a Twitter account, you can mention your Twitter handle. If you're on Facebook, just anything you're comfortable sharing where people can kind of, just reach out and follow you and keep up with what you're doing.
Sure. My Twitter is David C. Garrett. Pretty easy. And then I have a blog at Screenwriting Magazine, but I have to, let me look. Exactly the URL. Scriptmag.com, David Garrett.
Okay, you're a writer.
Yes.
You're one of the writers on ScriptMag.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Mm-hmm. Perfect. So I will gather all that stuff and I'll put it in the show notes, and link to it. As I said, Dave, This has been a great interview. It's been inspiring for me just to hear someone out there. You have a lot of hustle, and your success is not by accident. So well done.
Thank you. So, and I like your podcast. So thanks for having me on.
Hey, thank you, man. We'll be in touch.
Okay, good.
Bye.
A quick plug for the SYS Screenwriting Analysis Service. It's a really economical way to get high-quality professional evaluation of your screenplay. When you buy one of our 3-packs, you get evaluations at just $67 per script for feature films and just $55 for teleplays. All the readers have years of professional experience reading for studios, production companies, contests, and agencies. You can read a short bio on each reader on our website, and you can pick the reader who you think is the best fit for your script. Turnaround time is usually just a few days, but rarely more than a week. The readers will evaluate your script on 6 key factors: concept, characters, structure, marketability, tone, and overall craft, which includes formatting, spelling, and grammar. Every script will get a grade of pass, consider, or recommend, which should help you roughly understand where your script might rank if you were to submit it to a production company or agency. We provide analysis on feature films and television scripts, and we also do proofreading. So if you don't want an analysis, but you would like a professional reader to give you notes on just purely the typos, the spelling issues, the formatting issues, we do offer that as a service as well. As a bonus, if your script gets a recommend from one of our readers, you get a free email and fax blast to my list of industry contacts. This is the exact same blast I use myself to promote my own scripts, and it's the same service I sell on the website. It's a great way to get your script into the hands of producers who are looking for material. So if you want a professional evaluation of your screenplay at a very reasonable price, check out sellingyourscreenplay.com/consultants. So just a quick note, last week in the podcast, I mentioned that this week I was going to be interviewing screenwriter Alan Trezza, who wrote a film called Bearing the X. The film is actually going to be released on video on demand in late July, so the producers asked if I could push that podcast episode back a couple of weeks, which obviously I'm happy to do. So I've pushed that episode back to July 27th, so I've already recorded it, and I recorded it probably 3 or 4 weeks ago, so it's in the can, and it's definitely going to come out in a couple of weeks. But again, we're just going to try and time that release of the podcast to the release of the film, and hopefully it can help promote the film a little bit. So keep an eye out for that episode on July 27th. Again, as I mentioned last week, it's a pretty interesting interview. This guy, Alan, he's a guy, and much like David from today, he's a guy who's a real hustler and really, put this film on his shoulders and did a lot of the producing, got a director attached, and really carried it across the finish line. And he talks about that whole story of really how he wrote the script, sent it out, and ultimately helped to get the thing produced. So keep an eye out for that episode. Again, I think that's going to be July 27th, late in this month. So to wrap things up, I just want to touch on a few things from today's interview with David. There was a lot of great takeaways from this, but as I was thinking about the interview and some of the great takeaways, the great things he said, I just jotted down a couple of notes. So I'm just going to touch on a few of those, but I think there was just a lot of great information in this interview. One of the things I think was really interesting, and I encounter this all the time myself, is, he made the comment about original ideas and, just being in an office of an agent, and they just got a stack full of like super original scripts just sitting on the shelf. And I think that's one thing that newer writers, especially newer writers, really fail to comprehend, is how the idea, the original idea, the idea that you think is just so super original and so marketable, and you show it to your friends, oh, that would make a great movie, and it's like they just don't realize the volume of people out here who all have creative original ideas. I mean, the smartest, most creative people on the planet are trying to do this. They're out here in Hollywood. Literally, it's the smartest, most creative people. Out of the 6 billion people on the planet, a high percentage of the really smart, creative people are here trying to do this as well. So it's like there's just so many great ideas floating around there. There's so many great original concepts that people have, and newer screenwriters, they so often overvalue these ideas, and that's not really what's valuable in Hollywood. A great idea, you want your script to be based on a great idea, yes, but what's valuable is a great idea well executed in a fully fleshed out screenplay. That's actually quite rare. But just to have a great idea, it's not going to get you that far. And I get a lot of emails from people selling your screenplay. I get a lot of emails. People just stumble into my site and they send me emails. I'm not a screenwriter. I don't want to be a screenwriter, but I've got all these great ideas. How can I sell my great ideas to Hollywood? And I've written a post on this. I'll link to it in the show notes. But the short answer is there's no real market for great ideas because there's tons of great ideas. Again, what's valuable is a great idea executed well in a screenplay, a fully, fleshed out screenplay. That's what's valuable. Just having great ideas. I mean, there's just not, first off, the ideas are not nearly as great or original as this new writer thinks. But even if they are, it's very difficult just to sell an idea unless you have some sort of a track record or some sort of, inside track on, studios. You can get meetings with studios and pitch stuff. So, and I think that's really worth considering if you're a new writer, is thinking about, how are you going to stand out from the crowd? How are you going to, differentiate yourself from the other smartest, most creative people on the planet? How are you going to stand out from that crowd? I think what David is suggesting, getting a job like what David has as a lawyer, where you can tie in your writing with your day job and leveraging your day job to help your screenwriting. I think that's brilliant. That's an excellent way to do it, because you're not spending time, I guess you could maybe meet someone waiting tables, but not really. But, if you're just working some sort of a day job completely unrelated to the entertainment industry, or completely unrelated to screenwriting, you're spending, 8, 9, 10 hours a day doing something that's not in any way, even subtly, moving your screenwriting career forward. And I think that's a mistake. I think being strategic, like what David has said, is having these legal skills. I mean, those are always, as long as there's an entertainment industry, there's going to be a need for those skills. And he's going to be able to make connections, make relationships. And that's so important. And frankly, that's not that dissimilar to what I'm doing here at Selling Your Screenplay. Obviously, I make a little bit of money through selling your screenplay. But it's also subtly helping me. I wouldn't even say subtly. It's probably less than subtle. It's really helping me as a screenwriter. I'm meeting a lot of people. I'm interviewing on this podcast. I learn so much just from doing these interviews. So I'm leveraging, some of my day job running this Selling Your Screenplay with, writing screenplays and becoming a better screenwriter, just being on the front lines of doing these interviews, asking the questions that I want to ask. It all is sort of tying together. So I would really urge you to consider that, especially if you're considering making a big move to Hollywood. You don't live here and you're going to move in there. Really think that through, and consider carefully what you're going to do once you get here. You can work in the entertainment industry. You can get a job, as a production assistant. That's the lowest job in the entertainment industry. Basically, you're just an assistant to someone and doing whatever errands or odd jobs they want. And those jobs can be good, and you can definitely network with them. But the problem with those jobs is some of them will literally pay like $50, $60 a day, and for a 10 or 12 hour day. So you'll be working enormously long hours, and you will be being paid basically peanuts. So it becomes a very difficult scenario to get yourself in a position where, you only have to work 7 hours a day, and then you can spend a couple of hours every day writing and pushing that into your career. So really consider this carefully, what it is you want to do and how your day job could potentially leverage. You could use that as a leverage to help your screenwriting career. I think if you come out to Hollywood and you think, well, I'm just smarter than a guy like David, I'm just more creative than a guy like David, and that's going to be the thing that differentiates me from the rest of the pack, just my raw talent and raw creativity, I think you're probably in for a rude awakening. There's very few people on this planet that just have that much, creative talent. I'm not even sure that there's really anybody. I think most of these people, even the people at the absolute top of the game, I think you would find that they're pretty hard workers and pretty persistent, and they're doing a lot of the networking and the marketing. They're doing a lot of these other things that David talked about in his interview. Another thing I just want to mention in quickly in something that he said is, this whole idea of you have to give to get, and his whole, going to the stand-up comedy clubs and, approaching stand-up comedians and say, hey, do you need some legal help? That idea of giving to get. And it's not in just a new agey karma way. It's it's a real practical way of networking with these people. And again, it's not unlike what I'm doing somewhat with Selling Your Screenplay. I'm getting to know some of these people that I'm interviewing. I'm getting to actually know them and make connections and build relationships with them. So part of this podcast is actually helping my screenwriting career. And I think what David's doing is similar, being a lawyer and approaching people and offering, to help them out with their legal matters. Again, as long as there's an entertainment industry, there's going to be a big need for lawyers and someone with legal expertise. So he's got a skill set that's going to be able to help him forever. And I want to really emphasize this idea of giving to get. I get so many emails from people that they email me out of the blue. I don't know them. And it's all about them. They email, hey, can you help me sell my script? Hey, will you read my script? I just want to know if it's good enough. And it's such a turnoff. And I don't mean to sound, selfish or well, it should be all about me, but it's such a turnoff to get to find people. They're just takers. They want to just, hey, how can I help them? What can I do for them? It's like, it's just, do I have time to just read scripts from somebody I don't know? And it's like, I feel bad. And sometimes, I try and help them as much as I can. I have a bunch of Gmail pat responses set up that I can usually pretty quickly give people pretty customized answers to their questions, no matter how, ridiculous or how selfish they are. So I try and help these people as much as I can, but it's such a turnoff when someone just approaches you and it's just all about them and they just want to know how you can help them. And again, this isn't like some new age karma thing. I've written a podcast, or I've written a blog post about this as well, and I mentioned this. Script Dr. Eric, who is a script analyst, he has his own script writing site. When he first approached me, he just sent me an email. He said, hey, I like what you're doing on the blog. I'm a script, analyst. If you have a script, I'd like to do it for free. Just send me one of your scripts and I'll give you a free analysis on the screenplay. And he wasn't asking for anything. He didn't say, hey, can you pitch my service, or hey, can you recommend people to me and I'll give you a free analysis. He just said, hey, send me one of your scripts. I like what you're doing. Send me one of your scripts and I'll do analysis. And we've become friends over the years. He ended up joining my writers group for a while, so we got to know each other better through that. We've talked. I ended up helping him he did a script writing contest. I ended up, reading scripts for that for him and helping him pick the winners for that. So there was just, it was the beginning of a relationship where we got to know each other, and over time that built. But it started by him, offering to do something for me with no expectation that there's going to be a return. And I'm sure he's done that to other people where he said, I'll read a script for free for you, and nothing came of the relationship. And that's part of the thing. You can't get too caught up on that. And just to hammer this point home, the way I met David was, I mentioned at the top of the podcast that I'm now doing a newsletter of producers who want to read material. And David is actually, as a producer, he's a writer and a producer. So as a producer, he was in my list. So what I did was I sent out an email to all of the producers on my list, however many thousand that is. I said, listen, I run Selling Your Screenplay. Would you like to be on our monthly newsletter pitch where screenwriters can pitch scripts to you? And as I said, I've had well over 100 now producers signed up to be on that newsletter. David was on the list where I was approaching him. And then he emailed me back, said, well, I'm not really looking for material. I'm actually a writer myself, so I'm not looking for material. But if you ever want someone to come on your podcast and talk, I'd be happy to do it. So again, there was no expectation that I'm going to do something to him, but he was just generously offering to help me out. And, maybe we will form some sort of relationship. Maybe down the road I can help him in some way, but maybe not. But that's not really the point to get focused on, well, what can you do for me? But just extending yourself and building these relationships. That's how you build real relationships, is just getting to know people and doing stuff for them. And it's not always going to pan out. You're going to do a lot of stuff for some selfish people that never repay the favor. And you can't get hung up on that. You just have to give and continuously to be a giver. And those things will come back. And those, again, not in like a new agey karma kind of way. I genuinely believe they will come back to you, just because most of the people in the world are reasonable, nice people. And if you go out on if you extend yourself, they will extend themselves back. So anyways, I did write a blog post on that. I will link to that in the show notes, but really consider that. And as I said, David is not just talking, when he says he's not just talking, like I really saw it in action. He extended himself, and hopefully people can track him down. If they get something out of this email, send David an email. Say, hey, I heard you on the Selling Your Screenplay podcast. Thanks for doing it. Just extend yourself, and you never know how things can kind of come back to you. And, you can get to know these people. I also think, from talking to David, one of the things that was interesting to me is just what a humbling experience it is. I mean, he's like super smart. He's a real hustler, sounds like a good salesman. He's out there, really trying to make things happen for him. And it's just, listening to it is a humbling experience for me. Obviously, I consider myself a hard worker. I consider myself a hustler too, but I listen to somebody like that, and you can look at his IMDb credits. You can look at my IMDb credits. He's definitely had more success than me. And it's such a humbling experience to hear, how smart he is and how hard he works. And I realize, I got a lot of work to do, to get to that level, to have a resume as chock full of successes as his. I just listen to him talking and what he's done in the past and what he does in the future. I realize I got a lot of work to do. And hopefully other people that listen to this will feel the same way. And as I said at the beginning of this little talk, it's not going to be creativity. It's not going to be, those are not going to be the things that really get you past someone like David. It's going to be just pure hustle. It's going to be persistence. It's going to be hard work. You're going to need to be creative, obviously. You're going to need to be smart. If you're not smart, if you're not creative, obviously you're in the wrong business, but those are not going to be the differentiating. So just listening to him, for me, I just enjoyed this interview so much. And as I said, it was just such a humbling experience, hearing him talk about how hard he's worked to get the credits that he's had, and how much work it's taken, and how much work it continues to take. He continues to hustle and continues to write. So hopefully everybody can listen to that and take that away, because this is a great interview to really hear. It's a screenwriter in the trenches, doing what has to be done, and that's really this is the life of a real screenwriter. The majority of people in Hollywood, it's not the Christopher Nolans or the James Camerons just up there playing at that highest level. The Quentin Tarantino's writing, a brilliant script and going out. That's exceedingly rare, and I hope it happens for you. Good luck to you. But if it doesn't, and you still want to have a career in this, you can do it. But it's going to come down to a lot of hard work and a lot of persistence and a lot of hustle, getting out there and hustling. That's really what it's going to take, and I think David demonstrates that. Anyway, thanks for listening. That's our show for today.